Oh.
Here's a scarcely tricky question. Jim, what's your opinion on the relationship between prohibition and the pushing of certain pharmaceuticals? Do you know?
Geez, it'd take me more than the 2 stops I've got left in this bus trip to explain that one to you.
Okay.
Why don't I do that tomorrow when I see you today?
Tomorrow on the show we'll have the G-Man himself.
Get my head around that question. Yeah, I'll have some thoughts for you tomorrow.
We'll be talking about prohibition.
People said radio was dead. Bounce back is fantastic. So media. That's right. It's cheap.
Meanwhile, I'll turn purple and blue.
It's all we can do to keep it up. Keep it up. Stick with other people. That's right. Do the best you can. It's all we can do. So, I'll see you at your place tomorrow, man. Is that the story, or?
Yeah, how close to yours are we? Come and see St. Philip's Anglican Church. We have, it seems, an ungutted church. I might try and request the opportunity to engage in a discussion or debate with the pastor here. St. Philip's O'Connor.org.au. Okay, so celebrity criticism concerning why do you think Tom Cruise was picked by South Park in 2 episodes where they had him depicted as being in the closet and packing fudge at a facility like where they actually sell fudge? They're like, and they approach him going, Tom Cruise, you're being a fudge packer, and he's like, I'm not a fudge packer, and he's just on the conveyor belt packing the fudge. Yeah, like actually chocolate fudge that you would buy in blocks. Yeah, but he's denying that he's doing it. He's like, as he's passing it on the conveyor belt, he's going like, I'm not a fudge packer. It's funny. Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to be critical of why these characters are. It's like, in principle, it's supposed to be very inspirational. But certainly some have more integrity than others, and some can change your life forever, and some can become quite embarrassing, and some can have very sad lives.
Yeah, but no, Luca might get made up to school and fucking throw her in the cop with me.
Yeah?
Well, she just sent me a message saying she's been divorced for years.
Yeah.
I sent her one saying I was divorced years ago. I can't believe she kept that note from fucking over 40 years ago that I wrote her.
This album, Issues, by Korn, was released in 1999. And I remember the time that it was being prepared because the fans were notified that there was a contest where fans could make covers and could submit the covers, and Korn would judge which fan made covers were the most impressive, and in the end I don't think they couldn't settle for one cover, so they ran alternative presses of the album, and you would get any one of 4 nominated finalist covers. So this is the teddy bear that was like, I think, nominated to be the primary or the default cover. And the album had Falling Away From Me, and the film clip is fantastic because it just rolls on from the depictions and narratives in Freak on Leash with the cartoon people.
So my son used to get into South Park, and he was always getting in trouble at school because he was only 6 or 7.
There was a wave of like friends when we were in high school talking like Cartman.
Yeah.
Especially Cartman.
Well, my name's Tim, okay?
Mm.
And I didn't know what my son and his mates were on about because they come in there,
Timmy!
little cripple kitty.
Yeah. Joe and I are talking about them both the creators are Republicans. They've come forward and said that they're Republicans.
Who's that, South Park?
The Trey Parker, Matt Stone. So.
Well, what's the Republican? Where does that? What's it we call them in Australia?
What you notice in the episodes is that there's often like 2 competing. It's like that whatever it is they explore they make fun of, you know.
Well, they done that movie about Thunderbirds or whatever. I never watched it.
World Police.
World Police or something, wasn't it? Something like
Team America.
Team America.
Yeah, that's good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'm funny crap. My son showed me how to put my phone up and get on the Netflix. Oh, what? Is that your grainy filming one?
This is old. Yeah, I'll show you. This is called VCR. Look at that. I just flicking.
Oh, that's cool, yeah. Looks like something off the X-Files.
This segment is entitled Filters I've Known and Loved. Featuring Tim. This one is stupid. It's called CGA. It's just like you can't see shit with it.
That's alright though, I don't mind it.
This one's called Blur. Your whole face blurs, see? Like blur, blur, blur. This is another.
Come away from the phone.
Yeah, I downloaded these apps.
Because I've got some funny one.
When I first envisioned the prospect of the show. This is another old one. And this is Mirror.
Yeah, I've got the mirror, I don't know how it works.
Look at that.
Oh, that's cool.
Fuck you.
I won't be able to find it now.
Whoa. Oh, this is good. This reminds me of when I got punched in the face by Noddy a few weeks ago. I'd have enjoyed it if I understood his motives. But it just seemed to be him calling himself what was the word he used? Began with R. Can't remember. I was too punched. This is like laughing at the Christian's warning that you'll go to hell. Look at this, Tim. You're going to hell.
Oh, geez, you're burning and everything.
I'm so sorry I talked about that religious man that touched me.
Yeah, he touched me in the back. My ladybug.
He left a tampon on my driveway. So, are you sure you're not crazy? I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, the owner of Capital Chemist, he took the staff out one year to play a game of how to host a murder.
Oh, one of those people bloody me. Did anyone get killed?
I didn't go that year. I decided to stay home because I was offended because I was told that this man is quite ruthless in business. But then I wondered if games like How to Host a Murder served to him as some sort of archetypal template for when he works to get someone pegged as a nutter. And you know, what he does. I partially know. YouTube can know, and on we plow.
I just can't believe this girl has kept a little note that I wrote her for more than 40 years ago.
So Gary Cann's first, I think, potentially unlawful accosting was during my earlier shifts at Tuggeranong Hyperdome Capital Chemist, and he and Cassandra Smith stood hips pointed towards one another a bit, and Cass held up a curled pointer finger in front of her forehead while saying video. So I knew that video back then in 2001 had a bearing on the nature of their interest or inquisition into me, but I felt it rude right away. I thought, if you have an issue here to discuss or bring to my attention, elucidate it, make it clear. If you're making a claim or an assertion about me, if you're running some sort of test on me here, say what you're doing, because I don't like this sort of ambiguous bullshit. And they didn't do that. So yeah, where I lost my temper verbally in 2010 was after ruling out, like, I'd gone like, does Roger have some, you know, honours degree in existential psychoanalysis? No. He has this correction system going, but how does he know when someone's in the wrong and warrants correction? And does he mean by, I'm correcting you, I'm going to make you a Freemason believer? And why do they have prejudice against the imagination? As Gary Cann spoke out against dreamers and him hating dreamers and saying it's when the kids come out to play. Essentially, he's doing things that, he's in favour of things that are tremendously unhealthy for brains. If the brains can't be free to imagine and dream lying in bed, he's a fucking disgrace. The guy's an outright cunt. He's a piece of shit chicken, and like, you know, they might be hacking, going through my phone from time to time, and they might look at the pictures I'm making of them where I'm writing about their bullshit, sick minds, and going, oh, doesn't he find us fascinating? And I'm like, no, I don't. I found you so offensive. So offensive. I've got to get both of you out of my system, because I stupidly placed more trust in the two of you as employers and upper management, granting that I had to accept your success in building a pharmacy franchise. I had to imagine you characters of a certain amount of respectability. But after seeing the sick lines of questioning and the sick pedophilic judgments you're capable of, I mean, what would you, in the event that you were to run a study on a child that had grown up or gone through adolescence in the company of step-siblings, and they thought, my sister is sexy, but it was a step-sister that they had no blood relationship with, and they didn't even engage in an act or attempt to, you know, I mean, would you say that that was wrong? Yet they would flag your system as someone who went, ooh, sister sexy, and you go, oh, that's, you know, incestuousness. Well, is it? You know, step siblings that don't come from the same bloodline whatsoever have been known to grow up and get married. And yeah, I mean, there are idiots, I think, in...
It does seem to be in Roger Toll's mind that if he can't conclusively measure and establish one or more psychological conflicts within your mind, then so he can give justification to years of calling you a poof and saying you were sexually embarrassed by your father. Now, you're not sexually thinking of anything sexually, and I only knew my father until 5th grade, so puberty doesn't obviously sink in for quite a while. And all I really wanted to achieve with that art piece was that she understood choice and willpower, because mother wasn't giving much lessons on willpower. My job since age 5 has been to keep Mum happy and feeling safe as well, and I've helped put an end to marriages where she was subjected to domestic violence. So rights charter is very important to me. Where the smugglers come along is when they're knocking on your door to give Jehovah's Witnesses. Additional, when it comes to this initiative to measure and establish what certain live, active, relevant conflicts allegedly are in a person's mind, they have a definite propensity to want to tell me that I would favor certain violent acts or violent behavior and the violation of other people's rights. But my friends that remain to this day know from my story that I'm actually twice as against that. That's just the way I've always been. But yeah, I just wish a lot of these healthcare professionals could study a broader spectrum range of philosophical texts and why arguments for why theistic language has been recognized to cause more danger than tranquility and enlightenment, because it's like you got a bunch of people going, well, we've got real problems, and they're okay, direct it to the imaginary man in the sky. Don't you know how important he is? He murdered his son, the long hair one. He's great, you know. And yeah, religion convoluting your comprehension of your own case because of religiosity in the healthcare staff system. They're reducing your rights to take to court what they thought was the meaning of a piece of art. So, it is worth mentioning now at this point, I'm a shaving cut. Certain friends with whom I can correspond in the USA are more or less aware of Roger and Tall and Gary Cairns being more or less pedophilic. I had to choose my moments, and there haven't been much in the way of correspondence this decade, more or less. Throughout my years with Capital, I did correspond with certain friends to say, well, I'm not sure if this Freemason church is more dignified than the Christian church, or if, because they're secret, they have possibly more pedophilic men that are members, and because they're secret, it more is concealed, more is covered up, and more of them get away with it, with what they say and what they do, and, you know, trying to order people to assume a sexual orientation as if the person has no comprehension of choice.
They seem to be gallantly against choice. They're against a lot of Enlightenment, post-Enlightenment philosophical concepts, like the suspension of judgment. They'll always be like, are you for or against something? You know, like, you have to be for or against, you know, capital chemist. You can't suspend judgment. So a lot of these concepts that came out of the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century, they would.
So there are aspects to the capital experience, all in all, that were good. I mean, it's not true that I first learnt social drinking with them, but comfortable enough around the people that you're around and schmoozing and socializing. You're you know, and that implicit competition to see who's going to throw up the most. Yeah, you know, it's going to make me seem a bit like an evangelical minister if I say that, you know, everything about them is bad. Not even everything about Hitler dated Eva Braun, you know, was that bad? He liked it if she pooped on his chest. Now, was that bad? Yeah, okay. But it is beyond bad luck for as far as Roger and Gary have gone. I've been able to work this decade because of them, more or less, largely. That if they've got you in their mind to be what they call, like, they'll use terms like a drug addict or a junkie. It's actually a bad ad hominem that means they aren't thinking of your rights to access your health rights. Is pretty much what that means. Because and it also means it incidentally because they would favor saying that, you know, you're a psychotic person because you like hard rock music, which is once again bigotry. So, you know, you're psychotic because you're a fan of Korn and Marilyn Manson, so you need to be injected with sedatives. Those sedatives actually harmed my heart quite undeniably, and the fact that if I was got to refuse them, they would have me tied down by guards. I ended up saying, look, if you guys have what you think is a serious matter, look into my history and my story, learn what psychiatry and the Christian religion did to my early childhood, and ask yourself why it isn't child abuse for you to keep me here now. If you've got, that is where I do think Roger Toll's definitions are jacked and might offend gay people. Because if you have to say, he can't really say all of them. You know, the definition should be the description that unifies the whole lot of them together. So defining a gay man as a person whose sexual preference is towards other men, and a lesbian as a woman whose sexual preference is towards other women, is better than, you know, a woman hater, a man who is a woman hater, or a woman who is a man hater. Because it's not like the gay men who don't hate women still aren't still gay. So Roger's definition would make women haters out of all gay men, potentially. But that's why the Freemasons are known worldwide to be a bunch of, you know, unappreciated geniuses. Bad manners once again, I suppose. If they could then try to say I was psychotic, it would up their chances, because if I come forward for the first time in my life saying I have substantial reports on at least 2 criminally minded people in Canberra, then will my reports seem acceptable to most people, given my life experiences and I got the job at Capital Chemist by catching one of their shoplifters to begin with. So when I could no longer work there because of upper management and the two owners, then it's like they have to say, you know, oh, he didn't really catch a shoplifter. Like, he was in a disillusional state. He thought he was beating up some women. He just accidentally, he disassociatively returned a stolen fragrance, stolen from another store, to the Hypernome pharmacy. But he was in a dissociative state. It was psychotic, really. In his mind, he was killing. He was plowing a Korean brothel. His body moved, and he grabbed the fragrance, returned it. So I don't think it's going to really end up being the case at the end of the day once all of my reporting is completed. I'm just going to make sure that when I do it, I don't want to be having moments of going, oh yeah, plus this, and like have a whole nother really serious offense to report. That's one reason I'm taking time. But yeah, I can believe him. Contacting me saying he loves having responsibility. Right.
I've always been a great lover of eccentric art, and so Double Hers is a film that's always been very special to me. It was also around the time there's a lot of expressionism celebrated in principle in that album and era for Marilyn creatively. But in thinking about what concepts the film Doppelhers represented as his last words and of that era for him creatively, sort of it celebrates closure in a way to just a certain way that Marilyn was doing things. But yeah, I already copped one. I really hate I hate it, especially when religious literalists seem to somehow completely forget the literal definition of the word art. It's like, since you're so into by the book, don't put an S at the end of the word context, because though we do, we might like to be cons, but if you put text after the word con, that's a bit overwhelming for us, and if you put an S at the end of the word context, then that's way too much. But art is never, it's never artificial or, open to interpretation. Actually, at one point, Nietzsche even wrote, there are no facts, only interpretations. It is always really interesting to appreciate different people's takes on things, but just the effort to try to say, why anyone would want to say, well, this clearly means this. Certainly I'd agree that some aspects of certain forms of art are less, the vast majority of people would see it the same way, but it was around that time in his career Manson was saying, art is a question mark, should never be an answer. So observing people who know this, know that art is open to interpretation, know that, any two people might interpret the same piece of art in two completely different ways. It does mean, in the interest of etiquette, you would think that if one wanted to know the value of a piece of art to you, they would ask you questions concerning interpretation. And
What's your name?
so time I spent, time I would spend kind of alone, just
In the spirit of our no comments, just questions.
yeah, thinking of it. It's not singled out as. I love all of Maz's art, and I have since about, I think, 1998. It was 1998 I had gone back to collecting his first album, the Smells Like Children EP, singles for songs like Lunchbox and Antichrist Superstars, Remix and Repent. But thinking about how it represented some of the concepts about the end of Christianity, and the irony that you might say, like, the woman who had taught me who wanted me to be a Christian activist for my career. I would pay attention to the sorts of things that she would say, because I didn't like. She was saying, "Oh, but he's calling himself the Antichrist. He works for the devil." And Christians have that view that if you aren't following God, then you serve the devil. But Antichrist, I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche who first. I think he was doing this as part of his indictment of Christianity. But he took the biblical term of Antichrist and used it as a name for an existential philosophy book, where it is that I have disagreed with some of his. It's a beautifully written book. I love it, but yeah, some of the anti-Christian writings. They're brilliant, but for the validity of arguments, what New Testament scholars have paid attention to the last 200 years concerns the veracity of texts, and 3/4 of the Gospels being interpolated plagiarisms. It means that if they're discredited with really good reasons like that, then you can criticize the plagiarized and interpolated texts, but they can't actually represent Jesus' own views. So the ideas that those three Gospels contain, Matthew, Luke, and John, can be by all means criticized. The teachings in them, as Christian teachings, can be criticized, but they can't be conclusively said to be the ideas and teachings of Jesus. The only one that could be is the Gospel of Mark, and there are arguments about how reliable that is, because for it to come to be, there had to have been about a 37-year-long oral tradition, which was just people being so moved by the event, the tragedy, and all these people talking about him. But it's said 70 AD is 37 years after 33 AD, so no one really sat down and put pen to paper and said, well, this is the gospel of Jesus of Nazareth until 70 AD. And then people that had that in their possession years later wrote Matthew, Luke, and John's gospel. So Christians and even those who are against Christianity alike can tend to overlook, because of the arrangement of texts in the order that they're arranged in the Bible, it goes Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then John. So they tend to think that Matthew's was written first because it appears first in order, and they're all calling the Bible the Word of God. So they should say Word of God, but books not necessarily in order, or something like that. But they won't. But anyway, yeah, and there's lines like God mod. The word God mod is referred to in the Golden Age of Grotesque, and it was in surrounding interviews. Part of the Marilyn Manson experience is not just about the album content itself. That's the thing, when art can be so interpretive, and best understanding its meaning as you can means a lot to you, then the accompanying interviews from tours and media appearances or approved journalist appearances where album concepts that go into an album or a tour or music videos are discussed in better detail are always very interesting as well. And so God as a sort of a euphemism for the process of creativity is discussed in interviews by Manson then. Because I think some people were trying to say, I had a feeling that would happen too. I thought, well, because he does a cover of Depeche Mode's Personal Jesus. And it was interesting because I would think back to how, this girl that had taught me about Christianity and the Bible in high school was like, well, she cautioned me about Marilyn Manson saying, he's the Antichrist, he worships the devil. She used the term worships and the devil. And I was just interested in how, she could be making these bold claims about knowing what is involved in being able to save the world. But once there's someone like Marilyn Manson to consider, she will preclude his point of view without examining his quotes or considering his point of view. And evangelical Christians can do a lot of that sort of thing. It's almost like if you're not a Christian convert yet, then lying about other people, or trying to tell you feel bad and they know why you feel bad, and you don't, and they don't ask you if you feel bad or why you feel, or if you do, something's got to be the problem. There has to be the problem, and then Christianity is the solution for the problem. And if there isn't a problem in place for Christianity to solve, then one has to be conjured immediately that Christianity can then be ventured as the solution for. But that sort of Christianity, and there isn't another that I've been impressed by, but teaching that Jesus died for you. Oh, but he died for you. It's Bishop Spong will say it's a very guilt-ridden message. And so the irony of this person's point of view, ours, was that, Marilyn Manson ends up doing cover of Depeche Mode's Personal Jesus. And so I wondered if people were going to say, oh, so now Antichrist Superstar has recanted of his evil first platinum album, and he's found Jesus Christ, and now soon he'll be shaking hands with the Pope. But I understood what was going on because I thought I did, and I don't seem yet to have been wrong. But he was asked questions like, how can you hate God and how can you hate Jesus? And he said, I couldn't possibly be against Jesus because your religion killed him and what he stood for. So if there was thoughts of Jesus of Nazareth behind the inspiration for picking that Depeche Mode song to cover. It was Jesus as a human being. It could just be because it is a good song from the 80s. But yeah, the irony that the Antichrist wound up having a more level-headed, naturalistic respect for our best attempts to ascertain who Jesus was and what he stood for than people like Christians and Freemasons, theologians. Was indeed ironic. Yeah, but that's the thing. So it's not someone that I consider him to have been a wrongfully executed, interesting person from the first century. I do not comprehend what was just about. I don't comprehend anything to have been just about the crucifixion. And yeah, for me it is as far as Christianity goes, you know, if you want to show respect for Jesus, not becoming a Christian is one good way to do so. Because yeah, is it things like mass hysteria or whitewashing the political system at the time? All of things like that are much more suitable reasons to suppose an interest in writing these elaborate theologies where they take as many ideas as they can out of paganism, all the stories of dying and rising saviors coming back on the third day, all throughout paganism. Of them all, Jesus Christ is the most recent. So, and then it seems to have been military conquerdom, and like people like Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, making Christianity an official religion. Yeah, no, so by 2003, the albums are also, and the interviews that you've studied, Marilyn's interviews have always been my favorite out of Andy Rockstar. And there's just a lot to learn. If you could even be against, you could be offended by metal music and you'd still find his interviews brilliant. But yeah, you watch your doppelgangers thinking about what you're thinking about at the time, and you know, the two women strapped back to back. And you know, you're counting out the stanzas and the poetry and the musing on the questions, and so yeah, if you defend the bisexual rights movement, but the man paying your wages is calling you a fag at work all the time, you just pause and you're empathizing with the two women strapped on the ground. The film is being likened to a mindfuck. One thing I think, yeah, you know, one reason I take some opposition to this theologies and claims and arguments for the supernatural beliefs is that one simple reason is that, a bit like square circle, married bachelor, or virgin porn star, you often can't make sense of the term supernatural. And like Adam and Eve and their children inbreeding, that isn't supernatural. That's about as counternatural. But yeah, was this a thing, a big thing for monarchies? Incest. If you watch Game of Thrones, it seems to be in Game of Thrones too. There's, inbreeding will keep our bloodlines pure. Be great for the castle. So if they want to say supernatural means like phenomenally, amazingly beyond the scope and capacity of what can be done in the natural world, they've got to. I think they need to show you. Like technically, you should say, well, then you should have like almost like technical specs or a scope of like nature can deal with this. If something is above and beyond nature, so that we are calling it supernatural. It's beyond natural, because you would want to make sure that there isn't just some concept that hasn't been explained to you properly yet, or you haven't thought it through or spent enough time thinking about it. So you would suspend judgment until you've had enough time to think properly and effectively. So we're essentially saying something is ruled out as being a naturally possible phenomenon, and then arguments for, then it's therefore supernatural. I don't just think you can take what's unknown and unexplained in nature and say because the explanations aren't sufficient. I mean, what they were saying in, I think, David Hume's century was, it was when some ideas of evolution, I think they even go back to Greece. But it wasn't as well developed as it has been in the 21st century. So certain proofs weren't able to be offered at the time concerning evolution's claims. So what religious people were doing then was pointing to that where evolutionary theorists were coming up short with adequate explanations that we now have in our time, and saying because you don't have these proper explanations yet, we submit to you that this is a supernatural matter. Which, of course, we submit to God has created us in the Garden of Inbreeding in His image. Yeah, so I think you have to make sure that what they're trying to sell to you as an idea of the supernatural world isn't really like something that can be done in the natural world, but would be absolutely disgusting if it ever were. And that's where it gets tricky, because then how are you going to know that something is supernatural? Like, will they show you like a telescope? This is our supernatural scope 5000. You could use it to scope out supernatural phenomenon. So that's again where that becomes a tricky question too. So it may be that we won't comprehend the word supernatural in relation to a definition for the word itself, because it's impossible for us to truly think of something supernatural. Just like you can't say, like, they could make the church of the square circles, and we're like, well, you might not think a square circle is going to change your life, but if you just believe anyway, and the square circle will change your life, and you'll become a married bachelor yourself, or you might even become a porn star virgin, and get sober drunk every Friday night. Anyway, I'm now going to charge my phone.
I will admit I did grow up holding contempt towards Queen Elizabeth II's advocacy of the Christian's Holy Bible. I saw it as a wicked deception. I saw that quite young. I remain silent often because I don't want it to be said that I'm like treasonous or traitor. I'm not sure what terms they'll come up with, because they're trying to defend a dumb religion. You know, they'll come up with ad hominems to the nth degree, because they will say that respect for the Queen entails some concession to her theologies. But I would debate her. I've debated hundreds of Christians. I know where they stop and go, oh, I actually can't explain that. So in the end, I wound up with my own interpretation of the Bible. It's essentially telling you things to protest. Every story, it's not to be believed in, as if God is telling you all of these things are true. There is no. We tried to look for God, and we found our own face in the mirror. We tried to look for heaven and hell. We found other planets. We found a core and mantle. You know. So it is a deception. I would be interested in debating her because I genuinely wonder if she thought, like, she looked at the Bible and went, yeah, teach them that. It'll reinforce my sovereignty, because it'll make them all fucking dumb. So that's why I would like to debate her, because I want to know if she actually has that streak in her. If she does, then I would further speak on the topic of whether, you know, she shouldn't be knighting anyone. One reason that I've been stammered from pursuing creativity as much as I want to is the prospect of being knighted. I would definitely not want that. It's just sick to even think of it. Because she's knighting people, it means she's absconding the prospect that her religion is fermenting countless criminal minds as well. So, you know, it means if she wants to knight people and go, well, look, I created this beautiful person, I'll knight them. She also has to say, well, the logistics of this Bible stories are so horrible that when there are feral criminals, then she inspired them too. Telling, you know, they read her quote and went, oh, the Bible's the most inspirational book according to our Queen. Then they read it, and then they believed in it, and then they went and committed all certain crimes. Now when that happens, the Queen will want like a psychiatrist to come along and say, no, they didn't commit that crime because of religion, your religion. They did it because of, you know, their mood shifts when the light bulb is off or on. So that, you know, our profile will blame the light bulb and have no mention of the Queen's religion being morally corrupting. But I don't think that being an antichrist and contesting the Bible and theology and the Christian initiative, and now evidently the Freemasons too. It's not tantamount to any beef with the Queen. It's a ground level rebuke of theology and the supernatural, with the additional claim that the supernatural can foster criminal minds because they're learning to be anti-natural. And that's the theme, underlining theme from the very start of the Bible. If you're all inbred, how anti-sexual is that? How disgusting is that? And look what it does to your moods, I say it and you get wound up. I fake human moods because I generally can't relate to why people get mad. I reserve getting mad for creative initiatives. That's how I grew, and I was doing puppetry as a 5-year-old. It's always been art that sustains me.
You knew what was going on. 4 hours later.
Jeff, can you say something rude and nasty?
It's not in my nature. He's a nice man. That's right, I'm a nice boy.
Alright, can I flip it? Oh, here we are.
You can say something.
I can say something rude and nasty.
But yeah, I did find it offensive. They often small names to people that...
My new Rammstein shirt.
I know.
I was trying to find a Manson shirt, and they are out of stock at land speed. I might have to order online. Also, it's time people bought David Bowie t-shirts. I will be buying a few of those. This webisode series is proudly imaginatively sponsored by Remember David Bowie. They're our Audi bags. So I'm approaching. I'm dealing right now with the realization that we've reached 38 episodes. I'm about to assemble the 39. I've also been talking to the G-Man here about my book. What are your thoughts on my book? Should I definitely write the book?
I've always been supportive of you writing your book. It's anything creative is worth doing.
You hear that? That was straight from the G-Man. My expectation is that the amount of death threats I get will increase with the book, corresponding to the release of the book. But it's got to be done.
I know. You get older, right. We can work on it. Yeah. Whereas the younger generation,
Luke, write the book. Luke, write the book. Luke, write the book. Write the fucking book.
I wonder what people are interested in. And LA is a pretty ordinary.